Get to my guest, and that is Alex Smith. And Alex, thrilled to have you on the air. Alex is the executive director of America Rising, and she's joining us today to talk more about this whole issue of Mark Zuckerberg on the Hill. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Glad you could give us some time today. Have you watched? I assume you've been watching some of the Zuckerberg appearance here.
I'm glued to it right now. The volume's just down.
Yeah. What's your impression so far?
Look, I think that what Mark Zuckerberg is doing is he's doing exactly what he needs to do. He's the CEO of one of the most known companies throughout the world, one of the most used companies throughout the world, who in our ever-expanding, growing, connected global community experienced a mistake. And he's owning up to that as the leader of that organization. I don't think we can ask, much more from people than to own up to their mistakes and to explain to the country, what happened. Look, no one willingly subjects themselves to the United States Congress if they had something to hide. Who would sit for this hours-long spectacle in front of all of these senators who want camera time and want funny YouTube clips to put up for their supporters? If they were trying to evade the public scrutiny. So I think he's doing what he needs to do right now.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of it, and I've heard him say, we're sorry, we should have done this differently, we should have done that differently. And I can't help myself but get back to the fact that, at some point a long time ago, whenever I joined Facebook, I don't know when it was, 2005, 2006, something along those lines, you have a user agreement when you go in there. Most people check the box and they move on. And that effectively gave Facebook the right to pretty much do what they wanted to do with the information you gave up to them, which included contacts and friend lists and everything.
Yeah, look, it all comes back to personal responsibility, right? And unfortunately, we're living in a world today where everyone thinks that they're owed something. It's the grievance culture. If I'm a victim, let me stand in line and get what I'm owed from this world. The bottom line here is that this is a free service that people signed up for. If they didn't want to take the time to either read through the privacy provisions or to just use common sense to know that nothing in this world is for free and that you are obviously signing something over when you sign up for a free service, you need to take some responsibility. That being said, I do think that Facebook has become, such a prolific gatherer of data and of personal information that it's not unreasonable to assume that there is a general lack of awareness of maybe how much information is being used. Meaning that if a misuse of that data occurs, I do think it's incumbent upon Facebook to own up to that and to apologize for that and to prevent for future abuses. But to assume that this is a company now that needs to be regulated, that needs to be punished, that's not the kind of country I want to live in.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that. And I should mention that Alex Smith, who is our guest, is also an attorney. So from a legal perspective, I wonder if somebody's not trying to set up some sort of a lawsuit here against Facebook. That's kind of what I've suspected this is about. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I brought up the fact that I listened to an interview with a lady who was the director of digital outreach for the Obama campaign, who back in March, there was a clip from her talking about how many contacts they harvested from Facebook for the Obama campaign. And I never heard any complaints about that at the time. So why do you think this is such an issue now?
This deeply bothers me as well. The Obama campaign, as you mentioned, they used data in incredible and new and innovative ways in the 2008 and 2012 campaigns. In fact, if you read, some stories from the campaign, a lot of Obama's top advisors and campaign managers will admit that they don't even think that they could have gotten past Iowa without the use of data and without their innovative thinking on this issue.
Wow.
And so they, it was undoubtedly a huge driving force behind their victory. And if I, remembering at the time, there were so many stories, books written about it, about how clever they were with data,
Right.
how much better they were than Republicans. And, they went so far as to mock Senator John McCain, a Vietnam, war hero, for not being able to hold a BlackBerry because of his injuries in Vietnam, if you'll remember. So that's like what calls to mind to me, all of this fawning over Obama and his use of data. And look, I think now, look, like I said, I think we're just living in a culture where everyone needs someone to blame, and there are more heightened sort of concerns about privacy because we know more about how information is used, and it's not just Facebook. I mean, there's concerns over, whether you're looking at Equifax or other sort of data scandals. There is an increasing awareness, but look, I think that, in the media's eyes, President Obama could do no wrong. Whatever he touched turned to gold. When he used data, it was innovative. It was smart.
okay.
When anyone else
Right.
uses it, it's a scandal.
I'm surprised Bob Mueller isn't looking into the Cambridge Analytica case at this point. The way he keeps expanding his mandate.
Yeah, no, I mean, speaking of law enforcement, though, here's a really interesting point about Facebook. So if you'll remember back in the San Bernardino massacre, there was an issue over a locked phone, right?
Right.
That we couldn't get into the phone of a suspected terrorist because Apple has a proprietary locking system on the iPhones to protect users' information. And Apple has fought that in court over and over and over again to prevent the reverse engineering of unlocking someone's phone. And their fears are justified that if they do that if they create something and it's out there, then inevitably someone else will get access to it and will be able to get into people's phones unauthorized. But Facebook, on the other hand, has been a cooperator with law enforcement. So we've seen in instances where we've had a mass shooting incident, where there's been a terroristic incident, any kind of safety concern has really been swiftly addressed by Facebook. They've worked to remove content quickly that's sort of deemed to be dangerous. They've alerted law enforcement officials, and so look, I think that they've been actually cooperating with our law enforcement officials during a time in our national security and in our country that's a little bit unsettling.
Yeah, well, that's true. Listen, Alex, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Alex Smith there from America Rising. Find out more at americarising.org, I think, is the website.